Hi everyone, it's Jaitni. I am a mindset and nutrition coach. So I help clients cope with stress, anxiety, or depression through healthy habit formation, making lifestyle changes, and incorporating proper nutrition. Every week I share a wellness related video. So if you're interested or intrigued by wellness, please make sure to subscribe to my channel. I also send out some self-love and self-care tips via my bi-weekly blog. So if you're more of a reader, make sure to sign up for that. I'll make sure that the link is in the description. And lastly, if you want to follow me on Instagram, my Instagram is @imperfectbodies by cmodi. So today's topic is imposter syndrome. It's really how to deal with imposter syndrome and how to gradually overcome it. So what I'll be discussing is what exactly is imposter syndrome. Trust me, most of us have it. It's very common. So I'll dive into the definition of it, and then I'll also cover some practical ways that can help you start to manage that imposter syndrome and then eventually get over it. So imposter syndrome, like the name suggests, imposter, is when you feel like a fraud. So when you think that you are not as smart enough or good enough or capable enough as the people around you think you are. A lot of times this happens in a professional or academic environment. So you may end up in at a university that's really hard to get into, or you may land up doing a really challenging job, a coveted position at work. And you have this imposter syndrome that, oh, you're going to be found out at any minute. Your boss is going to know that, oh, you're actually not that smart enough. Or your peers in college are going to say that, you know what, this person just, I don't know how they got into college. They're actually not that smart. So that's what imposter syndrome is like. You can have it at different times in your life. New parents have it. You can have it when you're starting a new role or a new job, or pivoting in your career. Like I said, it could happen when you're in an academic environment as well. Let's say you're going to a prep school or switching schools. At any time, any place, imposter syndrome can kick in. It's a little bit stronger for some people than it is for others. But one thing I want you to realize is that it is extremely common. So what I described is something that you've probably experienced at some point or another. I know I have, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's very natural. What's important is to recognize it, to accept it, and then to develop some ways that you can learn to manage it. Because what happens is, if it hangs around too long, if imposter syndrome really becomes your way of thinking, it can lead to negative self-talk, it can lead to self-doubt, and it can lead to missed opportunities. You lose out on taking those risks, you lose out on paying attention to what your intuition is saying, you lose out on getting out of your comfort zone. And there's only so much bandwidth to deal with that negative self-talk and that self-doubt. So that is why I wanted to talk about how to deal with imposter syndrome and how to slowly start to get over it. One thing to keep in mind is, this is a way of thinking. It's a way of coping, essentially. So it's not something that's going to go away overnight. But the more conscious you are of it when you're experiencing it, and the more consciously you put in the effort to deal with it, the sooner you'll be able to overcome it. That doesn't mean that it's going to go away forever. Life is full of different seasons and phases. So maybe when you step into a different phase of your life, it might come back. But at that point, hopefully you've mastered the art of getting over imposter syndrome and recognizing it in the first place. Okay, so the number one way to deal with imposter syndrome is to start to understand fact from fiction. So, when we're kind of in the valley, or when we're trying to feed the gremlins in our head, we tend to tell ourselves a lot of lies. So that is why I say you need to distinguish from fact from fiction. So whether you're in a really demanding professional career, such as a lawyer or a doctor, or you're a student or a new parent, or at any point in your life, whatever you're going through, when you start to feel that imposter syndrome start to creep up, question it, and question what you're telling yourself. How are you feeding this imposter syndrome? How are you enabling it? And that's when you need to start to figure out, all right, what is fact and what is fiction, what are the lies you're telling yourself, and what is the actual truth. It's not about, am I smart enough, am I good enough, am I capable enough? It's about, all right, what have I achieved? Am I a hard worker? Am I focused? Am I determined? Do I have the willpower? Do I have the work ethic? All of those factors are also important. So start to ask yourself those questions, because wherever you are in life, you deserve to be there. You've worked hard, you've done your due diligence, and you've gotten there. So even if you're a new parent, this is something that's very common in parenting, you have to remind yourself that you're doing your absolute best. No matter what role you're in, when that imposter syndrome kicks in, you need to really start to have a dialogue with yourself and understand, all right, what is truth and what is not. And at the same time, you need to remind yourself that you're doing your absolute best, because you are. In any given situation, given the circumstances, you're doing your very best. And it takes a lot of courage to explore unknown territory. So whether you're starting out in a new role, or whether you're starting off in school and whatever major you've chosen at university, all of that, it's unknown territory. It's not something that you've explored in the past. Yes, you're coming with a certain kind of skill set, and you're coming with a certain set of background. But at the same time, there is some challenge there. There is something new to explore, and that's what you're doing. And it takes a lot of courage, and it's important to recognize that. So focus on what is reality, and focus on the positives of your personality and your demeanor and your mindset, instead of focusing on something that's not true that you're telling yourself, or you're worried about what other people might be telling themselves about you. Tip number 2 is make a list of your accomplishments. This is something that I've also suggested in a few of my past videos, but this can make a huge difference. Even if at the end of it, that paper is just sitting wherever, or this list is nowhere to be found, the act of sitting down and making the list wherever you're making it, whether it's on your computer or by hand or on your phone, it gets you thinking, and it gets you in the right frame of mind. So everything that you're proud of, everything that you've accomplished, put it down, put pen to paper and make a list of it. Because what this is a reminder that you deserve to be where you are, that you're not an imposter, that you're not a fraud, that you have the experience and you have the knowledge and you have the thirst to rise up to the challenge and to be where you are. So that's why it's extremely important to have a list of your accomplishments. And then tip number 3 is turn to the right people. So it's very important to have a solid support system. I remember sometimes at work when I would start to experience imposter syndrome, I would turn to a colleague or to my mentors at work. And I was very particular about who I had my conversations with, because I was in a very vulnerable position at that point. And these people were the ones who would paint the picture as it needed to be painted, and they didn't fib about anything. They weren't putting me up on a pedestal. Instead, they were just being very honest, and they reminded me that I'm not a fraud, that I have the experience, that I have the knowledge, and that I have the work ethic to be where I am. I deserve to be where I am. And sometimes you need that reminder. So that's why it's important that you turn to the right set of people, and not people who are going to beat you down and who are going to actually elevate your self-doubt. You want the opposite kind, who are going to be honest, and at the same time really hold a mirror up and tell you that no, you have what it takes, and you deserve to be where you are. So it's very important to have that right support system, whether it's at work or whether even it's in your personal life. And something else that this does, when you turn to your mentors or your colleagues or friends or whomever, is you realize that you're not alone in experiencing the imposter syndrome. It's common, and it's very rampant, and everybody has felt it at some point or another, and they may have some really great ways of dealing with their imposter syndrome that you might be able to borrow, and that may work for you. So talking about it can make a difference, but just talk about it to the right people. Tip number 4 is stop comparing. I know it's really hard to do, and it happens from time to time, but the next time you feel that you're experiencing imposter syndrome, just recognize it, accept it, and for a second just slow down and ask yourself, what was the trigger? Why did this happen? Why is the imposter syndrome occurring. There had to be some kind of trigger, there had to be some kind of push that's put you in that position. And a lot of times what you'll notice is that trigger is you comparing yourself to somebody else. So that comparison, it's just going to put you in a very dark place and not necessarily help you get out of experiencing imposter syndrome. So be mindful of that, be careful of that, remind yourself pretty much every day, because the more you remind yourself, the more it becomes a part of your psyche, is that you have your own journey, you have your own process, you're your own person, and whoever you're comparing yourself to is not you. They have their own journey and they're living their own life. So it's very important to keep that in mind and learn to set your own boundaries. Figure out when you start comparing. Is it when you go to the gym, or is it when you're on social media, or is it when you're out and about with friends? Whatever it is, just get really clear and start to become aware of in which environment and which circumstance is that comparison taking place, and then does that lead to your imposter syndrome. So in my case, social media was a huge trigger for me, and I would feel like, all right, I'm starting to experience some imposter syndrome. I feel like I'm not good enough to be on social media, or I'm not good enough to be in the field that I'm in, and I realized I had to stop. For me, the best solution was to not be on social media, to scroll. Yes, I get on social media to do my work, but that's about it. I'm in and out as soon as I can, because that's something that I have a hard time coping with. So know those aspects about yourself. They're not weaknesses. In fact, it's called setting boundaries, and it's called learning to say no and really getting to know yourself well. And then the last tip is, tip number 5 is accept the highs and the lows. So a lot of times, we think of setbacks as failure. If I could ban that word, I totally would, but there is no such thing as failure. Setbacks are just feedback. That's what it is. Failure is feedback. It's just this loop, this feedback loop, and it's really a chance to learn, to grow, to absorb, and to be a better version of yourself. And this was really, for me, this was the key in dealing with my imposter syndrome, because I used to put so much weight on the outcome and the results, and that was so heavily tied to my self-worth. But when I started to realize that it's really, not about failure, and it's not about the end result, but more about the journey, I actually started to enjoy the process. So now I put more effort into getting to where I want to go instead of worrying about the outcome and the end result. And that is where that's where that big difference happens. That's where the breakthrough happens, and you stop thinking yourself as a fraud, and you stop worrying about what other people are thinking of you, if they think you're smart enough or you're capable enough. Because when you put in the effort, you're putting in everything that you have. You're giving it 100%, and then the rest is just what's meant to be will be. So it's very important to keep that in mind, is to accept the highs and to accept the lows, and to look at the lows as feedback, as learning lessons. That's it. It's nothing more than that. So let me wrap it up for you. 5 tips is, first thing is distinguish between fact and fiction. 2 is turn to the right people. It's very important to have that correct, solid support system. 3 is accept the highs, accept the lows. They're going to be a part of your life. Number 4 is stop comparing. It's deadly. It can really just destroy you, destroy your self-esteem, and take away from your dreams and your goals. So really try and not compare, or at least be aware of when you're doing it. And then the last thing is make a list of your accomplishments. So if you've been watching these videos and you haven't done that, that is your homework for next week, is to at least start making a list of your accomplishments. Maybe start with the last 3 years, and then you can go back into the past. But that will really make a big difference. It'll give you that boost that you need. Because imposter syndrome can be very debilitating. It can have a destructive effect. It's gonna hold you back. It's gonna, as I said, it's gonna really increase that negative self-talk. It's gonna lead to self-doubt, and it's not something fun. It's not something that you want to live with. You don't want that in your head. So recognize it if you're experiencing it, and know that you're not alone. A lot of people experience it on and off. Some people have it for long term. But once you recognize it, start doing something about it. I've shared some very easy, practical tips with you. Pick one that you want to experiment with or that works for you, and let me know how it goes. As always, thank you so much for your time, and I will catch you here next week. In the meantime, make that list of accomplishments and take very good care of yourself. Bye-bye.